Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of A Lifetime Aweigh. This episode, we're going to talk about Captain Carlos and the big white boat. So guys, thanks for joining us back here again. We're going to have a two-part episode here that's going to talk a little bit about how we procured our Irwin 68 down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and brought it back up here to Norfolk, Virginia. Captain Carlos had a couple hang-ups on the way, so we're going to split the video in half so that we can really make sure we get into some of the gory details about the struggles he had on the way back up here. But first off, we wanted to talk just a little bit about the boat itself.
All right, so Corey asked me if I wanted to be the captain of this boat that he found on auction. I was definitely intrigued and definitely wanted to take the opportunity to jump on that. Next thing I knew, I was on a plane to Miami, and I was walking through this area of a resort that I really didn't even think there was a boat on the other side. But I walked through this big, vast area, and then sure enough, I see this big sailboat. Up until that point, the biggest boat I operated was a Whitby 42. And so I'm looking at this boat, and it's just blowing my mind how big it is. And I start jumping on board and checking out everything. We really hadn't had the opportunity to view it very much.
So I went down and I saw the boat on a trip previous to that. The bidding hadn't opened yet. It was like a 30-day long auction with some pre-bidding time to be able to look. But I got to go by. I drove over to it and took a look at it under the cover of darkness. I knew that the boat was pretty immense. I didn't know what condition everything was in. I didn't know if it ran. We pretty much just had to go on the documents provided by the auction house. Unfortunately, there was a lot of inaccuracies in that. Things like a scuba compressor that were listed that were not on the boat, a water maker that the pieces, or at least what we think the pieces, existed on the boat, but there really wasn't a lot of the things disclosed like you would have hoped. Lo and behold, we got down there, we realized the dock that it had been at for 3 years, they said.
Disrepair for 2 years.
Yeah, so the dock itself had termites, and those had unfortunately come over. I think, you know, the boat, just about every hatch was leaking, and so there, of course, there was rot and water damage. Even on the types of wood that were impervious to pests and bugs had damage. So a lot of stuff that, you know, still needs to be fixed. But we were able, I think in the course of 5 days, we did a pretty considerable flip on this thing. So we had to do all new banks of batteries. I think we spent like $3,000 on the banks of batteries to get her back going. The windlass needed some pretty good attention. You know, it's got a 21,000 kilowatt generator on it that we wanted to make sure we had running. Then the Perkins turbo diesel. 225 horsepower is what that's rated at, so pretty substantial. We didn't get the chance to dive down under at that point because it was in the intercoastal waterway kind of down in North Miami and Fort Lauderdale, so lots of boat traffic. We did get lucky because the previous owner did actually have some of the cushions that weren't on the boat at the time that we purchased it, and so we were able to pick those up from him, and that at least made the boat somewhat more livable. One of the biggest issues I think that we encountered with the boat was just the fact that we had to get it off of the dock pretty quick down there. They were wanting something like almost $5 a day per foot if we stayed past the weekend. So we were able to negotiate an extra day or two, but we had to work pretty quickly. So we weren't paying a lot of attention to the niceties of the boat. We had planned that most of the systems wouldn't work. We tried to get one head functional and then pretty much get the boat underway. My dad actually came down with us, and we went through some of the electrical systems and made sure that we got the windlass working. That was a fire hazard. They had the missized wires that were running to it. We were fortunate that we were able to go to a welding supply shop to at least make it so that there was a switch on the boat that would operate the windlass.
Yeah, we had the port side winch working, and then thankfully there was a manual override, so when you put the winch handle in, it disengaged the electric winch and you could use the winch handle to do whatever you needed to do. So I had Corey and his dad there for what was it,
3 or 4 days.
3 or 4 days, yeah. And then they had to fly back. I was left with this gigantic boat that had to be off the dock in 5 days. So I really hammered down and made sure the engine was running and got everything going. And at the end of the 5 days, we went to leave the dock, and I went to do a propulsion check forward and reverse, and thankfully I did. The moment I did a forward pulse check, the engine died. There was an air leak in the system. I had talked to the dock master there and really just squeezed out another 2 days. We ran around like chickens with our head cut off to get all the parts that we needed in order for the motor to run. Now, we got it going. We had the winches were operating.
Yeah, it's got in-mast furling for both the main and the mizzen.
Yeah.
So both of the masts have electric furling that would bring those sails in and out. And we had some malfunctions with that initially, but once we replaced the batteries and actually got the generator to be able to charge them, those systems all worked as they should. We still have to check into them a little bit because there's a manual override on there, and that didn't seem to function very well either. So I think that they're probably going to need rebuilt or at least maintained.
And later on in the story, that manual override actually became faulty, and that's a whole different portion of this, and I think that'll be the second portion of the video when I get into that. Definitely something you're going to want to stay tuned for, because I was on the news and all kinds of other things. We leave out, we're going out of Port Everglades there, and I had to wait on a bridge in order to get past. Got the bridge, went outside, and pulled out the sails, and I was just amazed at the sailing ability that this boat had. I had sailed catches before, but it just seemed so easy. We had, I don't know, 10, 15 knot winds. It was right on the beam. We were able to make good time. Went to West Palm. There's a nice little anchorage there, and you can dinghy over to their local island called Peanut Island. And if at the time we really didn't have working showers, all the freshwater systems weren't gone through because we had just focused on really getting the boat operable so we can get it north and then work on everything the proper way, because we really wanted to dive deep into everything and all the systems and do it the proper way, because we want to make this boat the best boat possible. At that time, I inquired about my buddy that I went to the Bahamas with last year. He said he'd come down and jump on board and help us. We utilized the engine to get out of Port Everglades. You know, we made our turn north, and pretty much, you know, I'm always an advocate for shutting the engine down. Let's start the sails up and let's get it. And that's basically what happened. So I really didn't push the engine that much for that long. And I get into West Palm. Me and Kristen get in. I think it was in the middle of the night. I set anchorage. I'm pretty comfortable with that anchorage. I know what's going on there. And so we sit there for a day or two waiting on Chris, my buddy, to show up. And we inquired to the municipal marina there. We got a slip on their fuel dock. Thankfully, their fuel dock was not operable, and they let me stay there for a day. So I got to that fuel dock after a nice little debacle of me and Kristen pulled up the anchor. We're headed towards the dock there, and the engine fails. I give Kristen the helm. I go down below. I already have an idea of maybe what it is. I start going through the fuel system. Turns out it was an air leak. I traced the whole fuel system to find the air leak. At some point when I'm chasing the air leak, Kristen has the helm for a good 10 minutes, and I look up and I'm constantly checking with her, making sure everything's okay, and I see her eyes just get big. I realize there's a problem, so I run up on deck. I look up, and we're headed straight for the seawall there. So at a last ditch effort, you know, I pull out the head sail. By that time I was probably 100 yards away from a marker, going straight towards it. The south entrance to the ICW was right there. So I pull out the head sail, I turn her hard to port, and a nice gust comes right at the nick of time. And when I start turning, we slowly see the boat turning to port, and I'm 10 feet away from this red marker for the entrance of the ICW. Me and her are both just holding our breath, and the boat barely makes it past the marker. So I get her on a straight path going down the channel, headed towards the secondary anchorage that I had in my back pocket. If something went bad, then I knew I could throw the anchor out and I could sit there. I get her straightened. I go down below, get all the air out of the system. I get her to crank the engine. We get the engine cranked. We pop a Aweigh, and then we head towards the Riviera Beach Marina. We get to the fuel dock there, hang out there for a day, wait for my buddy Chris to come in. He gets on board. We do a nice walkthrough check on everything. I show him what all's going on with the boat, safety check. We stay the night there. We wake up in the morning, and then we head out the Lake Worth Inlet. When we go out the inlet, you know, there's a good 20, 25 knot winds, nice good 3 or 4 foot seas. Again, it was on The beam, it was a good sail, so we just pulled out the sails and headed straight for St. Augustine. We had a nice run from West Palm to St. Augustine, got into St. Augustine, and we inquired to the St. Augustine Municipal Marina for a mooring ball and a slip, because Kristen had to go home and Chris had to leave also. So we go stay the night on the mooring ball. I go to the dock the next day and they leave me. So this is the first time I'm soloing, and at this point, I have no other choice but to leave the dock because they had a reservation for somebody coming in that same day. I waited till slack, and the dock handlers there helped me release the lines. I back out of the slip, and then prop walk on that boat because I was bowed in is to starboard. And so I'm in the super tight area, I'm soloing, and I've got to get the boat backed out and head to the mooring ball. I was able to reverse thrust enough where the boat would come around. There's this huge motor yacht behind me, at least 130 foot. So I had to really work the thrust in order to manipulate the boat to get it turned out. So I get the boat backed out perfectly, don't hit anything, start going forward. I have to go get a mooring ball at this point because, being solo, I didn't want to have to operate the anchoring situation by myself. Either way, I back the boat out. I go to the mooring ball that I know. I've been to the mooring ball a few times. So I manipulate the boat perfectly, get up beside the mooring ball, make my mooring lines, sit the boat, feel like, man, I'm the man, I can do this. I was a little bit too overconfident, and that would lead to probably one of the worst experiences I've ever been through. It really goes to show that never think you're above having help. But at the same time, life happens. I'm a better man for what happened.
I think we learned a lot from it. So, both at Carlos's role and my role as well, and how we were pushing to get the boat back up here, and the things that we were doing. It wasn't necessarily that we incurred any risk that was exceptional, but I think you start to get to a comedy of errors where there's small lapses in judgment as you go along, and because you make several of those in a row, the compounded effects of those lacks of judgment can become catastrophic. So we were fortunate there was no loss of life, limb, or eyesight or anything ridiculous like that, but we did put the boat specifically in a pretty precarious situation, and of course Carlos felt like as the captain of the boat, he had been put in charge and had a sacred trust endowed on him to take care of it. And so I really appreciated that, but I didn't necessarily understand the scope of the situation. So I think that kind of gets us to the point where we're in St. Augustine, and that's where the wind picks up, and we start to have a lot of challenges and issues. So specifically Carlos does. But we're not going to get into it on this video. We've stretched this one out long enough. So we're going to wrap this one up. You can look forward to next week, episode 3 coming out, which is part 2 to this series, where we're going to talk about specifically the journey from St. Augustine, Florida, and all of the shenanigans that happened there to getting the boat up here, and kind of some of the good strokes of luck that we've had since the boat got up the ICW here to the Chesapeake in Norfolk, Virginia. So
I can't wait to get her back in 100, and we're getting out there and really doing our thing. It is.
Yeah. So should be a fast boat, a lot of water line. It's going to be a fun little monohull for us to put around the bay, and hopefully, potentially start doing some sunset charters and stuff on. So anyways, guys, I think that about wraps it up for us here. But until next time, stay away.